So welcome and good morning, everyone, to our April Southern Vermont New Vermonter Providers Network meeting. I do want to, open this meeting recognizing what a really difficult and challenging time it's been for many of our service providers here in Brattleboro and the region this past month. After the tragedy at Groundworks, that impacted many of us. The service provider community has really stepped up and filled a lot of gaps as those folks took some much needed time. So that's something that I expect it to be a lighter group and a little bit probably maybe a bit of a shorter meeting this month in lieu of that, but again, just so appreciative to the provider network that we have and all that you folks have been able to do this past month and really always. We're going to talk about two things today. One is going to be a really specific upcoming training that is starting in May and June, and I'll touch on that. And then hear an update from our partners in Bennington County. And of course, as always, an update from Joe, if you have them, and from the state. So without further ado, I'm happy to turn it over to either Joe or Tracy, whichever either of you, if you have an update.
Yes, I can start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your support. And Alex, you already mentioned that the difficult, situation we have all experienced in recent times in our community, but still, we still hold together. So just want to thank all of you for your support to Groundworks. I just want to give you a very short update. I just want to remind the group that we still have about 103 individuals who will arrived between January to September of last year that are still residing in our community. 33 of the people are in Bennington and 70 people are still in Brattleboro. As you all know, last year we came to you and and gave our projection of people we expect for this year, which is 2023, and our projection at the time was 100 people we projected. So far, between October 1 of last year to today, we have received 30 people. 15 of the people who came are from Eritrea, 6 people are from Yemen, 3 people are from Central African Republic, and 6 people are from Afghanistan. Currently, 9 of the Eritreans are resettled in the DFU Valley, which is the Vermonter and Dover area, and they are supported by us and our partners there. The remaining 19 people, which is the 6 from Yemen, 3 from Central African Republic, and 6 Afghans and 4 Eritreans, are still residing at SIT while we continue to look for permanent housing. We also have about 21 people that are allocated to us that we expect to arrive anytime. So for updates so far between October of last year and now, we have a total of 51, which is a 30 that has arrived and 21 people are expected to come out of the 100 that we projected. So far, that's the update from us. And any question, feel free to send it my way. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. And as a reminder to some folks, a lot of this work is done through this community consultation process, and that's happening this week. And so folks are, who are involved in that. That is the other opportunity to engage and ask Joe questions directly. So thank you, Joe.
And Alice, before sorry, as Alice mentioned, we will be having the community consultation every year. We come to the community to discuss with you our projection for the coming years. So our FY24 discussion will be this Wednesday. Tracy sent out an invitation, so we asked all of you to come to that because it's going to be an open discussion on what we are projecting for FY24. What are your concerns and suggestions so that we all discuss about those. So thank you.
Great. And Tracy, if you have an update statewide, hi.
Sure, yeah. So just piggybacking on Joe, quarterly consultations are actually required for all communities that are resettling, and we do that in a variety of ways, including the use of this meeting. But that one consultation that happens in the spring, that's really to prep for the next year. So that's kind of the bigger one where we really want to get into the meat of things. Just a reminder that we've got a few different pathways that are starting to pick up in Vermont with people arriving who are eligible for the same kinds of services that other refugees are. So we've got the Ukrainians still arriving, smaller numbers now, but we've got Ukrainians continuing to arrive. We have about 160 that are approved for Vermont. We think there are between maybe 80 and 100 here. They're mostly staying with private sponsors or private sponsorship types of organizations. Many of them are finding work. So that's been very nice. We've got the Haitians and Cubans who are also eligible to arrive and to work and to receive those same kinds of benefits that refugees receive: Medicaid, Reach Up if they're eligible, refugee cash assistance, ELL, et cetera. And so slowly there's a trickle there. Manchester actually has plans to welcome several, I think, Haitians this year, and I think they've already had 1 or 2 arrive. So those are 2 pathways. And then the third alternate pathway is the Welcome Corps, which is the private sponsorship program. It's been pretty slow to get moving. I think the federal government had hoped that there'd be more interest, but the number of people applying to be part of that program is very low. So we have pretty limited numbers of groups who are sponsorship groups applying for that program. I think it's been 0 for Vermont, and many states have actually had 0. So there's been about half the states have some groups. But that program, again, a private program where you raise funds and you really provide that intensive work in that first 90 days. Those folks are also eligible for the kinds of programs that refugees are. So after that initial intense work by the sponsorship group, they would also be eligible for the kinds of services that the Office of Refugee Resettlement funds, like the English language learning. Of course, they'd be eligible for refugee cash assistance if that is their situation, and the employment support and all of those other services. So 3 additional pathways besides regular refugee resettlement. And then finally, just to let you know that we continue to have people coming across the border as a result of some of the changes on the southern border. Mostly they're passing through. So we've got folks coming across the Canadian border. They are crossing in places that are unofficial, and so Border Patrol is picking them up. But there is a safe community release program. So what they're doing is releasing them into the community, and most of them plan to then travel farther south or out of Vermont, New York, Boston, down south. And so for families who, most of them have plans, and so they kind of move along with that plan. If a family is in an emergency and they cross and they have no money, or they need food, or they need help getting to that next spot, we've got a couple of community organizations that we are working with who are helping them move along. So that's kind of what you might be hearing about in the St. Albans area or in the St. Johnsbury area, Northeast Kingdom, et cetera. We do have some folks crossing over there, and we've got a variety of people assisting them in moving along. All right, thank you so much.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much for that update. Any questions before we move on? So, I think these overviews are always great because especially as things change in terms of how folks are arriving, it's important for all of us to understand this so that we don't just assume that if someone is coming to you, regardless of where you work, that if they're a new Vermonter, then they must work with ECDC. And they're, so it's really making sure we're connecting all the dots as needed, and that no one's, falling through the cracks who may want or need the services that we have to offer. Great. So what I want to touch on briefly before we hear an update from our partners in Bennington is a training that is launching technically in early June, but there's information sessions and a boot camp for it, and it's an early childhood education training program. And I will show this flyer. We have it available in Pashto and Dari, and we'll soon have it in Spanish. It's taken a lot to put this training together, from grant funding from Building Bright Futures to partnerships with all of our ELL partners. And we've learned a lot about training and credentialing for new Vermonters through this process. So today, between now and the first and second week of May, this is what's most important, I think, and I'll share this with folks and put it in the chat, is that there's a really great opportunity for folks to get a free credential to enter the early childhood education pathway. There's an info session on May 1st, and then from there, there's going to be 3 to 4 weeks of a boot camp. That's what we're calling, an ELL and cultural orientation focus leading up to a June 6th training. So there's different phases for this, and it's really exciting. What I think is relevant to everyone is that that our next meeting in May, we will talk about what it actually takes to put on this training. And so in our May meeting, we'll have World Learning and Vermont Adult Learning and other partners really provide that context of how do you go from an ELL working group that meets, monthly, we hope, to really implementing these kinds of training programs. And then we'll also talk about different industries and career pathways. So particularly for our health careers folks, that's a major focus for next year, is how do we take what we've learned from putting on this training for new Vermonters and really expand it to different kinds of trainings and really integrate it into our workforce and education system. So that's really a sneak peek for next month's meeting. But again, this training really does start before our next meeting. So I did want to share that. It will, so great question, Grace. This training will not be virtual. I think we'll talk about why we chose this model. I think that their virtual educational opportunities are more available and are also harder for new Vermonters to access. And so that's going to be a big trade-off that we're always going to look at, is who's the nearest training provider. It might be virtual versus what's the best learning environments for the population that we're talking about. And so great question. Unfortunately, this one isn't virtual, but we're using the fundamentals program, which is the course that CCV runs statewide. So there may be virtual opportunities for folks to take the fundamentals course that aren't led by us. It could be through CCV or through a different sponsor organization. Other questions or comments? I will put in flyers for English, Pashto, and Dari, and we'll include Spanish when we have that ready to go.
Alex, actually, I did that, and
Oh,
Spanish
perfect.
is also included there.
Okay, great. I will.
Hey, Alex, it's Sue.
Hi.
Hey, sorry I jumped in late. I just want to express appreciation for BDCC and the Welcoming Communities group for your willingness to jump into this coming from the perspective of the Child Care Counts Coalition that's looking at the early child care education workforce and how desperate we are. And really your willingness to partner around this BBF grant and Jen Stromson and really just figure out a way that to try this and see if it could work. And so I know your work has gone above and beyond what sort of the parameters of the BBF grant, what our imagining of what maybe it was going to take to do this. And I know that you reported out at another meeting, at the BBF meeting, that you think you may have a cohort of as many as 19 people right now that may at least go through this first phase, which feels remarkable to me. And so I just want to give you kudos, you and your whole team, really, and everyone who's been involved in identifying potential participants in this program. This is, as we know, brand new work for us all. And I think it's a really remarkable achievement that we've gotten this far. And I really just want to appreciate what it took to get us here. And I'm really hopeful. We had we intentionally set not low expectations. We want to have a high, we were expecting a lot, but we understood that it might take, if we got one person through this pathway into the workforce, we're going to consider that a success. So the idea that it could be more than that, and that this could really be a learning opportunity and a way to replicate across other sectors feels really exciting. So I just want to really appreciate, I know we're going to hear more about it next month, but it's been, other than helping to kind of put the initial grant together, I have not been directly involved. And so I so appreciate that other people have really made this happen. And it's a great collaboration, again, through identifying the Building Bright Futures funding opportunity and the expertise in this room to really implement something brand new feels really exciting. So anyway, just want to give kudos.
Thanks. Yeah, Jen, I see a.
And I just want to say, like, this for me, thanks, Sue, who wrote most of the original grant for me. So I not only identified it, but actually did that. I want to say this is also a chance for us to really like practice what we know works for in like a rural area, being kind of like sensitive to the conditions and kind of, trying to figure out like which partners can lean into this and also being a little flexible. Like we were just having this conversation today about this. And I think this is important because a lot of times a workforce development program, treats people like they're a cog in the machine. It's like, we're going to have this class, it's on this day, and that's it. And we're, really about figuring out what are the needs of the group. So first we have to convene the group, on May 1st, and then really figure out like, what are those childcare needs and what are the transportation things, and developing something with that in that way is really not typical in workforce development, but it is actually what's needed. And we are lucky enough to operate at a scale where it's possible and frankly necessary. And so I think that's just the kind of thing where we're, pioneering things sometimes that are not just relevant to rural places, but actually I think, provide solutions that can scale and are a little complicated, but that's okay. And I think we're also really blessed again to have members of the refugee community involved in doing this work. Last week when, Amir said, I'm going to need to talk to people's husbands because this is still kind of a journey of getting people out of the home and into the workplace. I was like, oh yeah, no, thank you. That's a level of cultural sensitivity and understanding that like is going to be embedded through this process. And I just, it's just incredible. So thanks to everybody.
Yeah. And Tim, thank you for that comment. This work was made possible by many different people, including Tracy's office, in supporting the retention of new Vermonters long-term, because most of these families have settled in and now they're asking, well, what's next for me here in Vermont? And so we, part of this work is absolutely coming up with that next opportunity for folks. And it was messy, and I'm excited to like explore that with everyone. I will take this opportunity to plug the Southern Vermont Economy Summit, because the entire summit is great. I have very little to do with organizing all of it, which is always a thrill to me because of how great it always is. But I am hosting a panel around working communities and our work in how we go from something like an ELL work group to a training, or how we go from the BDCC driving a van, daily for employment to partnering with Southeast Vermont Transit on a microtransit study. So, it's often very messy, the in-between parts, but we're all about piloting. This is a pilot. That's how we do things in rural communities, is through grants and support from individual organizations and agencies. We figure a thing out and then we scale it up, and then we all take our little pieces home with us, and that's what we own moving forward. So that's the last thing I'll share. Anyone who has an individual who may be interested in this training, have them reach out to myself or Amir. They should definitely come to this May 1st initiative or info session. And if there are folks from the Wilmington, Deerfield Valley area, Wilmington and Dover, who may be interested, have them reach out sooner rather than later. Because if it's possible to include them, we'd really like to, but that would require different transportation solutions than we currently have in place. And then once we know how this works, we'll rinse and repeat in Bennington County and other places. So that's the plan there. Great. Questions, comments, or concerns? Great. Awesome. So I see Jack is here, graciously agreed to provide an update on what's going on in Bennington County. So Jack, if you want to provide an update and tell us how things are going. Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you for thinking of Bennington. We have been doing a lot of work out here. We are a small but mighty office. Currently myself and Megan Winslow, who, as many of you know, is currently on maternity leave. But that has not slowed down our development now that we have our temporary office space here in Bennington. Everyone here in Bennington is, as Joe mentioned, we have an Afghan population of new Americans here in Bennington. We have about a little over 30 people, and we are soon to be expecting some new arrivals. So there's been a lot of work going into making sure that we're ready for that as a new resettlement site. These will be the first new arrivals coming directly to Bennington, not coming through Brattleboro, and also maintaining all of the work that we've been doing with our current clients. In addition to that, we're working on growing the office itself. So one of the big pushes that we've been making is for hiring. We have had 2 positions open. We think we're about to fill one of them. And if any of you all know of anyone who might be interested in being a refugee resettlement case manager for ECDC in Bennington, send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat and or send Mark an email or let us know, because we do have a position open for a case manager here in Bennington, and we are actively recruiting for that position. Even though we've been, as I said, sort of a smaller office from the staffing side, that hasn't stopped us from doing a lot of different things. We've been particularly focusing on our ongoing collaboration with Bennington College and with higher education efforts generally. That's been an area that has seen a lot of really positive developments. I think we've mentioned before that that we had a Nowruz celebration and we had an iftar during Ramadan up at Bennington College, which was a chance for a number of members of the community, both those interested in higher education and those who are in an age bracket to really benefit from connecting to the college community, actually go up and experience the physical site of the college and start seeing more about what it might have to offer them, either academically or socially. So that was really exciting. And just this past weekend, in collaboration with Vermont Interfaith Action and several different local faith communities, we had an Eid event, a celebration on Saturday. So a lot of really strong community collaborations, and building off of that, something that we really have to be attentive to here in Bennington and are putting a lot of effort into is just community education. Refugee resettlement is new throughout Southern Vermont, but particularly here in Bennington. There's a little bit of groundwork, or at least more groundwork, laid in Brattleboro through some of the work that was already being done with asylum seekers. So we have 2 events coming up this weekend. Actually, there's going to be an event with the co-sponsored by the Bennington Free Library, who have been an amazing partner with us along the way, getting books translated and finding language learning resources that can be available to all. But this is going to be an event where we can really start sharing some of the stories, because refugee resettlement has now been happening for a little while here in Bennington, though the ECDC office is newly opened. There have been a lot of really wonderful stories of community connection, collaboration, and benefit that we can tell. And so we're going to have an event that really highlights those stories, is a chance for members of the Bennington community who haven't learned as much about perhaps Afghan language and culture yet, to give them a chance to start finding out more about not only the resettlement process, but also the culture that is now here in Bennington. And then the following day, I'll be giving a separate presentation just about the refugee resettlement process generally. And both of those events are going to be a chance for us to start finding more new volunteers, because we've had our incredible co-sponsorship group, BCOA, who have gone above and beyond over and over and over again, more times than could possibly be counted. But because we are going to start having new arrivals, I see your question in the chat, Sean Marie. Currently, we know of one, there's a family of 3 who we know are coming. And as we know about others, we will obviously be in touch. So we are finding more volunteers who can help support these new arrivals. And so both of these events will be a chance not only to do general community education, but also to bring more, hopefully more volunteers and potential co-sponsor groups into the resettlement fold. We continue to have our monthly meetings with, we have a monthly meeting that we host that we invite all of our community partners to, and we're really happy. That is something that I give Megan huge credit for kicking off, and I've done my best to maintain it. I'm, maybe not as well as she would have, but I give her huge credit for putting that together, because now that we have this annual consultation coming up, we were very happy to be able to just say, hey, take our normal monthly meeting time, we'll hand it over to you for the annual consultation for Bennington. And we also have several ongoing monthly meetings with certain community partners and are always open to having more. But we meet monthly with the school district, for example, and also with economic services, just as a way to be sure that we're regularly checking in, aside from our day-to-day business, to take a step back every now and then and make sure we really do understand kind of what the bigger picture is. And as a result of those monthly meetings, we're also able to hopefully plan in advance. So there's going to be a job fair in May that we can start planning for now. The school district is going to have a Juneteenth event that ECDC here in Bennington will be able to play a role in, and potentially have some interesting art or other community projects grow out of. That is most of what's been going on in Bennington. I think all of what's happening is good. The biggest headlines are that we are hiring and that there are some new arrivals will be coming soon. Yes, Tracy, I see your hand is up.
Hi, Jack. I just wanted to piggyback when you were talking about the colleges and having people kind of check out colleges, I think. So we're starting a grant. So the state has a grant with VSAC that begins May 1. And the purpose of that grant is to provide consultation and some guidance to specifically Afghans, because we have a significant amount of Afghan money, in order to help them navigate the system, connect them to financial assistance, and just provide kind of post-secondary educational counseling. So they've already reached out to, I believe, ECDC's education person, who's Thomas, but VSAC will be providing that statewide. So that's for Bennington and Brattleboro and anyone who arrives in that region. So it is Afghan centric right now, and I'll look into figuring out a possible amendment to allow for them to do that for more folks, but it does have a heavy Afghan leaning right now. Thanks. And I'll provide information to ECDC and others about how to contact when folks would like some of that guidance. VSAC is good at doing this and good at helping people figure out the financial piece of it as well.
That's great. Yeah, are there any questions about anything from the Bennington side? I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer what I can. I guess I should also mention that we've had contact with several new employers, and we've, done our best to connect with Jen and Amir and everything, but we've also had real great success in that realm in the last month or so, and have had some really good coordination between BDCC with ECDC and Brattleboro, and then also our clients here. It's been a good kind of pooling of resources to make that work for folks.
And I also want to add that the annual consultation, I think Jack is on Thursday, right? Would that be this Thursday?
Yes,
Yeah.
so there will be different, because we have this standing meeting with our community partners that we offered up for the Bennington community consultation. That will be on Thursday at 1 p.m. and there will be a specific invite about that going out today, but it will be taking the time that we've always set aside every month for community partner meetings.
Right, so it's the same, like the same planning for Brattleboro. That will be on Wednesday. That will be specific for Bennington on Thursday. So myself will be in both meetings. So we encourage our community partners to come to those meetings and then have your questions and open discussion as to what we will be proposing for FY24.
Great. Any other questions? Anything to add? Again, I mentioned that today's meeting is short. Tim's got a great question for VSAC stuff before we wrap up. Ooh, and it's a doozy. So regarding VSAC, I don't know, Tracy, if you have more information around what's the eligible expenses.
The eligible expenses. So we're giving VSAC a grant, and VSAC will be reimbursed by the state for providing educational counseling around a variety of topics. I believe they may be connecting people to vocational training. So I'm not sure what eligible expenses means and what they mean, what your questioner means. Sorry.
So VSAC also, so they have their non-degree grant program that always exists. That's, so VSAC is, helping pay for the early childhood education. That is through their traditional allocation of funds for folks who are eligible, of which I believe all refugees are eligible if they've had their year residency, which is being waived. But is there, I guess the question, Tim, is that,
I see. I see the question here. So they want to know, is it limited to post-secondary, or could it be applied to non-degree or non-credit bearing? I'll double check. I'll see what they do. We basically said, do what you do, but can you tailor it toward Afghans and build it up for Afghans? So I can check in with them. I think it is. I meant post-secondary more around, outside of high school, but I don't know that it's uniquely necessarily having to connect to college, but I can find out.
great.
Tracy, typically VSAC does the non-degree program. I mean, they do a lot of trainings. They cover tech center classes. And so Alex, who is sponsoring the early childhood free program? Is that through your BDCC?
Yeah. So we're technically the sponsor of that program. So,
Okay.
And again, we'll talk about what it takes to put on a training, in region, but, so we're contracting with the training provider, which is CCV Northern Lights, which is the major training provider. And then we're also contracting with local ELL providers. So we are the nexus. We're the ones herding the cats, but we are doing none of the training or the ELL ourselves, of course.
So Val is not involved?
They are. So, yep. They're going to be, the layout of the course. One day a week will be like classroom instruction, and a second day of the week will be an ELL focused catch-up day. So if folks who have, sat through that week's class still have questions around the language or the content, there'll be another session that week for folks to catch up or to prepare for the next week's class. And Vermont Adult Learning will be doing that part of it. World Learning, through their new Vermonter education program, will be doing the preparatory cultural orientation and industry specific language part leading up to the training. And so that's how we're doing it. And VSAC is paying for the training itself. So for the individual to attend the training. And so, part of this preparatory session is getting everyone enrolled in WIOA and with VSAC if they haven't yet already. One thing I'll mention about VSAC, which is important, is that the year eligibility is something that's still in place for some of their funds. And if you are, however, if you're ineligible for that, there's scholarship funds that have been running out quickly. So I think, just to circle back on the importance and, my gratitude for Tracy in supporting VSAC, is that I think we kind of know that there's VSAC is great. There's a little bit of gap in the semantics of their eligibility that I think just more support will help easily fill along those lines.
I have one last question for you, Alex.
Yes.
So and you may not know the answer to this, the students that you have enrolled, do they have their high school diploma?
Ooh, so no one's enrolled yet. That's the part of the preparatory session is to get folks ready to be enrolled fully for the training. Not all of them do, and that's another part of the workforce development pipeline that we're working on is variances. So, technically a GED is required, but we know that that's already being discussed at the Office of Professional Regulation to be waived. And an employer can issue a variance for someone they hired. And so this is all part of the exciting and complicated nuances of workforce development, and it'll change. That's why health careers, to be honest, health careers we put off a little bit because the Office of Professional Regulation is a lot less flexible around those kinds of credentialing and licensing or than around certain other pathways. And so we're really starting to learn where that wiggle room is. Yeah.
Well,
And Alex, I think DCF is putting out some new rules. I know they had them out for public comment. I had hoped they were going to get done last year. And I think those new rules around childcare providers will allow for more flexibility. Specifically, I brought a concern to them more than a year ago based on some conversations with childcare providers who felt like they couldn't hire enough new Americans because it would affect their STARS rating because the new Americans didn't have certain credentials. And we actually got a couple of new Americans on a group working on it with them. And so hopefully those new rules will come out this year that will hopefully assist a little bit. It won't be night and day, but it will assist a little bit to allow for more flexibility so that you don't get dinged on your quality because you've hired someone who didn't have a particular credential. I think they're trying to make a balance there.
Yeah. And I think one thing to note is that this is just for the fundamentals training. If there's someone who wants to go into early childhood education through a full degree with CCV, through their early childhood education pathway, then they would need a GED. And that's where they would work with Tutorial Center or Vermont Adult Learning on that part. So for some people, their education pathway is going to be years. And it's going to be first to get their GED, and then they're prepared for, 2 or 4 year degree or just a credential that requires it. And, it's all about stacking. And some folks will start this training or start in the preparatory session, and more literacy will be identified as a first step.
Alex,
go ahead.
It's all, I'm glad to hear this. And Tracy, I'm hoping those rules are changed, not just for, they're changed statewide and not just obviously for new Americans. But the other thing that we've learned over time is that you can still take all those courses in Northern Lights, not necessarily CCV, because if you're matriculated, you do need either a high school diploma or a GED. But the Northern Lights, all the training courses that can be paid for can be, like, as you said, let's sort of just put over here until, and soon as that diploma credential appears, those slide right over.
Yep. Yeah.
So
great. Thank you. Yeah,
info.
I think, if this is of interest to anyone, really the details of which, I really encourage you to show up to next month's meeting where we'll really dive deeply into what it takes to get folks to a training. And it's, we've only really touched on education and training at this point, but childcare stipends, transportation logistics, providing culturally appropriate food, if the training is happening during lunch, all of these other things that other folks here who aren't workforce development focused people, there will be a role for you to play in these trainings also. And so that's stuff that we'll touch on. So, if you're so again, we'll really go into depth around what's possible, what we've learned, and what we see on the horizon around workforce training. Yeah. Additional questions or concerns? Great. Well, thanks for coming. I think, I believe Jack did put his contact info. I know you had said to reach out. Jack, if you want to drop your email in for folks who have any questions, and Joe. But thanks for showing up. Looking forward to the May meeting. And again, as always, if you have any topics you want to see covered, anything you'd like to dive deeper into, just send me an email and I'd love to pull something together for everyone. Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good Monday.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.